Hello everybody, welcome back. In this video, what I want to do is I want to take the two most common motorized props and join them into one prop. And the two I'm talking about is either the casket or crypt lid, where it either moves up and down or side to side. And the other is either going to be a rocking tombstone, or it's going to be like that popper guy that kind of pops his head out from behind the tombstone. So that's what I'm going to be building in this video. And what I also would like to do in this video is I'd like to try to run the entire thing off of one motor. So I'm going to have to build a drive linkage that's going to allow me to make both aspects of the prop move, but all off one motor, so this way everything stays at the same speed and everything stays in time, essentially. This video will be a little on the long side, but that's because there's going to be a lot of complex designing between making both aspects do what they need to do and make sure everything works like it's supposed to. So I hope you all stick it out with me, and let's go ahead and get started and see how this turns out. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get y'all up to speed real fast of essentially what I built. What my game plan here is I decided to do the moving lid with the rocking tombstone instead of doing the poplar guy. I'm gonna do the rocking tombstone. So essentially, what I decided, I want my lid to be roughly 2 feet by 5 feet. I did make this a little wider. I made it 25.5 inches because I want to have a little bit of room to be able to come up and do like a taper before I go to the top portion. Just give it a little bit more detail. I don't want just a flat looking lid. And then I know it's going to be 5 feet, but I'm going to be doing the rocking tombstone. I got to be able to build all the mechanism and all that stuff for the rocking tombstone. I want to make sure everything stays in line, so I don't get any kind of binding or anything like that. So I left this extra long so I have room to work with this and build out on it. I'd rather cut these off where I need to than to add to them after the fact and possibly things not line up properly and stuff like that. So that's why I left these extra long. So the actual overall right now is 6 foot. Might stay fully 6 feet. It might be a little under 6 feet, depending on how it works out once I decide how I'm going to do the tombstone portion. You see I did some gussets in the corners, keep everything kind of square. I have this one piece of 2x6 right here. Now this is a very important piece for this particular prop right here, because this is actually going to serve multiple different little aspects of this prop. One of them, with being a 2x6 on its side, it has a lot more surface area. So with it being screwed in, it's going to help keep this whole front section square. So when I get everything mounted in here, this is going to stay nice and square. It's not going to move because that 2x6 is not going to allow it to go like this very easily. Also, being on a flat like this is giving me a nice wide platform area for the lid to be able to slide across like this with no problems. So I don't want to run the risk of only just having a 2x here and say the lid could fall behind there or something like that. Next thing you know, it gets stuck or bound or something like that. So this gives it a nice platform for that. And this also gives me an area to start building off of the tombstone portion, because I got to keep everything nice in line. I got to keep all my linkages with no binding or anything like that or resistance. This allows me to keep everything in one unit instead of building a couple units and putting them together. So so this one piece right here is actually going to be a very critical portion for this particular prop for attaching everything after this fact. For the lid, what I decided to do is a 1x2 to try to keep the weight down. Did the same thing. I did some little 45-degree corners, just to kind of keep everything square. Did a couple more in the center just to help with that. For the pivot point, you can see I have these extra bigger pieces here and here. I got a bolt here. Now, my original plan was I drilled the hole to where it just barely fit inside there so I could run it down with my impact gun. I was going to put a couple washers, run it down, put the lid on there. Everything's going to be good. I started thinking if I have to take the lid off for any reason, because say something's not working or I want to move it around, I don't want the lid constantly, whatever like that. And I got to take this in and out multiple times, and it's going to get to a point where this might not sit nice and tight, and it might not be a good solid pivot point no more. So I opted to actually just cut it off. So what I'll do now for that is, you see I left it a little extra tall. What I'll do is I'm going to put a washer on here. I'm going to drill a hole straight through here and just put a cotter key through there. And all that's going to do is that's going to make it to where I pull the cotter key out, I pull the lid off, put the cotter key back in there, the lid stays fixed to it. You see right now the lid will slide right across here, no problems. But even with the wood on wood, I mean, there's always a chance for resistance and stuff like that, drag. So I'm going to get a couple little nylon wheels, put them right here and here. So this way the wheels will actually ride on here. So I'll have like very little resistance whatsoever. So when I start getting all my mechanical and my linkages, everything's going to move nice and freely. So the next step is going to be I'm going to start building the tombstone portion, start figuring out how I'm going to create all those linkages. Once I get all that stuff figured out, then I'll start figuring out how I'm going to mount the motor. I'll show the linkages, and at that time I'll show you what motor I'm going to be using for this particular prop. It's kind of a midway motor between the reindeer and the wiper motor. But once I get to that point, I'll kind of show you that. But for the meantime, let's go ahead and start working on the rest of it. All right, so I made it to this part right here. I just want to kind of show you what I got going on. You saw I built a box essentially for the tombstone to sit inside. The reason I did that is because I want to make sure that everything is nice and stout, solid. Nothing's going to move except for what I want to move, essentially. So that's why I built this entire box, essentially, that this thing sits down inside. Plus, it gives me something to glue all my foam to, and stuff like that, and mount brackets and whatever I need to do for that. But then I got to this point right here, so I think, okay, well, now how do I want to make this thing move? Because I've already decided I'm not going to make it move here, because I think it'll look a little funny if it's literally moving way down here. Because when you have a tombstone like this that's like a cross, realistically, if it's ever going to break, it's going to break kind of up here, because this is the smallest section. That's most likely the area would actually break. So that's where I'm gonna actually make it tip way up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife, I'm going to cut this at a nice jagged edge to make it look like it's broken off. And to keep everything nice and confined and tight and compact, I'm going to take a 2x and I'm going to run a 2x4 up here. Make sure it doesn't go past the height of this right here. Now I'm going to put a hinge on there, and then I'll put another 2x4 from here all the way to the very top. Everything will be painted black so this way you don't see it. And then either I'll put an L angle or another piece of wood or something like that that'll come all the way over to here, almost to this point right here. And then what I'm going to do is my linkage is going to come from the front, and it's going to come all the way into this area right here. I'm going to cut this out so I can get that linkage, so for hooking the rod to it and taking it off if I need to. And then I'm going to bore a hole through the 2x on this side of the 2x right next to the tombstone all the way down to the bottom. So what's going to happen is my rod is actually going to be all the way by the tombstone itself, and it's going to come all the way up here. And whatever's going to attach it's going to attach right here. So when it pushes up, I'm going to get like this right here. What that's going to do is that's going to make it to where even if you were to see this from a side profile, you're not going to see all this massive contraption back here. Everything's going to be really small, confined, compact. It's going to look clean. I'm going to cut this excess off right here. But how much I'm going to tip is going to be based on how much clearance I have, because obviously I got to have enough room for my rotation. I am thinking about raising this up another 1.5 inches just to give myself a little more ground clearance. But I'm going to just kind of play with the look of it to see which one I like best, as far as if I want to lift about maybe 2.5 inches, 3 inches. Obviously, you think 3 inches right here that top is going to be really far over. So it's not going to take a whole lot here to really create a really drastic effect at the very top. So it's just more or less just kind of fiddling with it until I find something I like. All right, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to attempt to do kind of a camshaft kind of effect first for the lid, where it's essentially you can almost have like a lope like you see like on the crankshaft of a car. So I started off by taking 2 pieces of flat stock, put them together so I could drill the holes so I can make sure the holes is in the same spot. And then what I'll do is I'll flip that over and drill the same hole, because these got to be perfectly in line with each other. So this way when it rotates like this. You don't have one that's kind of oblong kind of thing. So I drilled one hole, I'll drill the other hole, and then I'll drill 2 holes in one of them to attach this to it. And then what I'll do is I'll put a bolt through here, put it really tight, make a sleeve for my adjustable link, and then I'll be able to put the other half onto it, and then we'll see what it looks like. And I'm just curious how strong it's going to be. That's why I'm kind of curious if this idea is going to work. If not, I have another idea that I'm thinking of. So I'm going to start with this, and then we'll go from there. So I can make sure that my stuff stays in line, I'm going to put the drill bit in there. So this way when I clamp it, I know that when I drill it, they're in the exact same location. I don't have to worry about one hole being different than the other. Now, one of the things I'm doing, because I want to make sure everything stays nice and straight, I drilled that hole, and you saw where I lined it up in here. I drilled this hole, and I'm putting one bolt in there. I'm making sure everything is, nice and free. Now that I have all that set the way I want it, then I'm going to go ahead and clamp it. I'll drill that second hole, and then after that, then I'll be able to start working on the other half of essentially my crankshaft, essentially. So I'm going to get that drilled out, get that bolted on, and then we'll go from there. Now I'm trying to do this whole thing without doing any kind of welding, just to kind of show, as long as it works. Essentially, all I did is 2 pieces of flat stock. I put the flange on this side with a couple bolts. I put a piece of 5/16 all thread on this side with a nut on either side. 2 nuts on either side of here to lock that in with another piece of 5/16 all thread. 2 little pieces of tubing that I also picked up, and another piece of flat bar. And the concept here is when it goes onto the motor, as the motor spins, this will go like that. And this one looks like it's a little out of alignment, but I should be able to correct that. But essentially, when the motor's spinning, this right here, this is what's going to push the lid, and then the rest of this is going to go to the front for the tombstone. So as long as it doesn't go into enough of a bind to where this wants to essentially twist right here, like right here at these nuts, I should be good. If they do, I'll probably have to weld them solid, but I'm going to try it first without doing any welding. But that's what I'm going for. All right, so I want to show the motor that I'm going to be using for this prop. Now, I've used these motors in the past before, and I kind of look at these as a really good midway motor between the reindeer motor and the wiper motor. The reason I say that is because they're a lot like the reindeer motor, but they're a lot stronger. These will move a lot more weight than the reindeer motor will, but they won't move as much as, say, your wiper motor will. These also are 110, like the reindeer motor, versus the wiper motors are 12 volt. If you use the wiper motor, you have to use the wiper motor, then you have to buy the power supply for them. Then you got to buy that little voltage dial, so this way you can dial in how fast you want it to spin. These right here come in multiple different RPMs, from 5 RPM all the way up to 60 RPM. They're a 110. And how you'd wire these up, your house wire usually has a black and a white wire. So your black wire will go here, your white wire will go here for counterclockwise, or you put the white wire over here for clockwise. The reason I say that is that's one of the biggest difference between this one and the reindeer motor. The reindeer motor will switch directions. So as it moves, it'll go like this if it gets bound up. These will not do that. If they get bound up, either they'll bend your linkage or they'll just stop and just won't move anymore. And they might even burn the motor up. The other downside of these ones right here is it'll even tell you on the website, these tend to get really hot for some reason. The casing gets really hot after about 15 minutes of use. But I've let one run for like 12 hours straight before and it never burned up. So that's apparently a normal thing about these. But this is essentially the motor that I'm using for this. And I picked this up on Amazon. And you know how a lot of times you buy some on Amazon, they usually have like a little package thing where they tell you, recommended items you could buy. This is the item that you've been seeing me use. It's the flange. This is the flange that actually comes with this particular one. It goes right here. What I like about this one is it has a nice flange on here, has 4 locations to anchor something to. Comes with 2 areas for a set screw, so you can lock it in place. And this is the piece that you've been seeing me use on that crankshaft piece, and then the piece I was going to put all the way to the far end where it's going to hook to the tombstone. So and between the 2 of these together, with shipping was like $31. So it's a little bit more expensive than the reindeer motor, but definitely cheaper than the wiper motor full setup, essentially, I guess you can say. So I just want to show you what motor I'm using. So let's continue with this project. All right, so you see I got that mechanism kind of in place. You see it was actually moving nice and freely. I'm hoping I don't have to weld it because I kind of want to be able to show where you could just go to Home Depot, buy these random parts right here, and essentially create this kind of linkage. So hopefully it doesn't malfunction on me. and make it to where I have to weld it. So let's cross our fingers on that. If anybody's kind of new to, like, say, trying to figure out their length of what they want, essentially, if you're doing something like this where it's going to be a full 360 degrees, you pretty much just add from your center point to the center point of your bolt, whatever it's going to be, whatever that is, you just times that by 2. So I have 2.5 here, so so I know I'm going to have 5 inches of overall travel when this thing does its full cycle. So if anybody's new to it and just kind of curious how you figure out how much travel you're going to have, essentially just whatever this is and times it by 2. But I'm at a standpoint right now. I got the Tombstone glued onto the back. I got the boards on there. I haven't cut the Tombstone yet because I want to wait till it's dry before I cut it. You see where I got the gate hinge on here. I did it this way so I have a little bit more stability with it. It's all screwed in place. Once the caulk is dry, then I'll go ahead and I'll cut the Tombstone, and then I'll start tipping it and figure out exactly how much I want to tip, and that'll tell me essentially how much I got to move here. And at that point, then I will go to my second piece that I'm working on, and I'll go from that center hole and figure out how far over I need to be, and obviously times that by 2, and that'll let me know exactly how much this needs to be. It might end up working out to where I might have to take this bracket off and just use one of these holes right here. It just depends on exactly how much it's going to move. So for the meantime, I'm going to let this dry, and then I will resume back on it once that's all dry. Okay, I wanted to pause for just 1 second and kind of just show you something real quick. Just in case, if say you're not comfortable doing the metal version I did, where I have all the flat stock and drilling the holes and the round bar and the all threads and all that kind of stuff, you're going to essentially create the exact same thing using PVC. Pretty much what you do is just hit yourself 490s. Make sure that these 2 pieces are cut to identical size, so this way, one's not bigger than the other. Put a pipe in the center. If you decide to use the same size T that fits the pipe, you just got to wallow the inside out so this way it can spin freely around this part. If not, you can just get the next size up T. The only downside of that is if you get too much play in here, your prop is going to like that. So if you use this and just wallow it out, you can make it to where it's a much smoother action. And then as far as your end piece, you'd take a cap that fits your pipe, and you'd literally just put it right on like that, screw it on. If you go with a larger piece of pipe, it'd be the same thing. And then pretty much what would happen is once you get your motor going, you'll see it would be able to spin right around just like this, just like mine's doing. So I just wanted to kind of show that there is another alternative to essentially creating this drive linkage that I built on mine in a more simplified manner. So I just wanted to pause real fast and just kind of show you that real quick. All right, so I got the Tombstone rocking. I went ahead and put the battery back on top of it, so you can see with the weight of the battery plus pushing on this, that motor is still moving with no problem. Like I said, they're pretty strong. I mean, you still can bind them up, if I really try to hold it, but it takes a little bit more effort than the regular little reindeer motors. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the mechanism for the cross. I made a little bit of a mistake, but it's easily correctable. All right, so here's the mechanism. See, I got my little flange down here. I added an extra piece of metal on here because I went originally in that hole right there, and it just didn't tip enough. And then the first piece I put on here after that, I had the hole a little further out, and it tipped way too far. So I kind of found that like a balance point of like right there is probably the best spot for this particular part of the rig. I do got to do something about this because it still keeps sliding out. But that's where I kind of made my mistake. Is I really should have used all thread for this, not just a round bar. Because when I got to the top, I didn't want to do 2 bends. I didn't want to do the bend here and then another bend here, because if I got it off, then either I'd be moving this bracket up and down multiple times, or I would have to try to straighten that bar and then try to rebend it again. So I wanted to put it up like this. So if I would have done all thread, I could have done 2 nuts right here, locked them together, and then 2 nuts up here and locked them together in order to remedy that issue. So it's a simple fix. I should just use all thread for that, but since I already got this one built, I'm not going to change it to all thread. I'm going to leave it as is. I'm just going to get rid of that sloppiness right there. But overall, I think it's moving pretty good. The next step is I'm going to put a counterweight on this side just to help with the ease of pulling it back because all the weight's over here now. So I'm going to put a 2x over here just to add that weight. That's what the clamp is for, just to kind of mimic the weight of a board. And then it's just then obviously that'll have to be painted black. And I'll start working on the lid. All right, so I've gotten started on the lid. I'm going a little different route than what my original plan was. My original plan was I wanted to make the lid one piece and it sets down on top of it, but I kind of changed my mind on that and decided to make it to where the border is part of the framing, so that stays put, and the lid piece, which is right there, will literally just sit right down inside there. And what that's going to do, that's going to make it to where if I ever have to get to any of the mechanisms, the motor for replacement, or to get to that cotter key to remove the whole thing, I can just take this whole top piece, lift it right off there, and the whole thing is completely exposed, making it easy for me to work on and get to. And the other thing I decided I'm going to do a little design change just because I like to challenge myself. I like to make things a little harder on myself sometimes. So I've decided that instead of just doing just a basic lid, I want to do a statue on top of it. So it looks like there's, like a lady statue on top of it laying down. So what I did is I picked these up a while back off the marketplace. It's a little smaller than most mannequin forms and such, but for the size of the lid, I think this is going to be the most proportional. Then I picked up one of these for the head, but when I looked at it, that's definitely nowhere close to being close. So I found these over at Joann's. It's definitely a smaller profile than this one. You can tell by the size right there. So I'm going to take my hot wire and I'm going to do some trimming on this, make it fit that body really good, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to do for some legs, some feet, and then some arms, and then a dress. So let's see how well this turns out. If it doesn't turn out really good, I can always just cut a new lid piece to fit down inside there, and no harm, no foul. So let's see if I can make this look good. Okay, so I'm going to complete the body here, like far as doing the legs and the arms. You see I already got the head on here. I notched it where the hair kind of goes on the shoulders a little bit, so when the dress comes around, you kind of see a little bit of the hair there. I'll dress up the neck later. To create the legs, I'm essentially going to take this block right here. I'm going to trace this out with my marker. I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to sand the sides so it matches the taper of this, and then have them kind of taper down a little bit. And then I'll probably have to add another little piece at the very back end to create the feet, and then the very center I'll kind of create like a kind of a hump in the center, so it kind of mimics the legs essentially. And that's how I'm going to do the legs and the feet on this. But what I'm going to do with the arms is I'm going to take that heavy duty baling wire. I'm going to send it all the way through the whole styrofoam right here, have it come all the way out, and just use this right here. And then this way when I bend it, I can bend it to where I want it to be, and then once the dress goes over top of it, I'll be able to disguise it and all that kind of stuff. So, but first things first, I'm going to make the legs, because the arms will probably be the easiest part of this. All right, so I pretty much got this part done. Now it's just a matter of doing the arms. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to take some of the glue these together, maybe put some nails to lock everything in place, and let that dry first. And then once it's dried, then I'll go ahead and I'll glue it down to the base, so this way it stays put. And then I'll probably caulk this seam and those seams, so as the dress goes over, it won't fall down inside that, and you see a line there. So I'm going to try to smooth all that out after the fact. So that's the next step, and then pretty much after that it'll be arms and do some draping. All right, so what I'm kind of doing at this moment is creating more work for myself, because I really don't like the face that was on here. This one, this one right here. I really don't like that. It just doesn't look really good at all. And I don't want to go through the whole process of putting all the paint on here and the whole 9 yards and decide then that I really, really don't like it. So I have an extra one of these. This actually, I pulled it off of another prop that I'm not using at this time. And I'm slowly carving it down to make it fit. What it is, I cut it at the hairline, so I kind of leave the hair on there. And I'm going to slowly trim it till it fits really as good as I can. And then I'll just use a little bit of caulking to fill in all the rest of it. And once it's all painted, you're not really going to know it anyways. But I just want something that's going to look a lot nicer than that right there. now I'm pretty much doing my little caulking thing that I do. Now that I decided to make more work for myself, I might as well go for it. So I added a bunch of caulking to the sides. I'm using a brush. The brush gives me like the brush strokes in it kind of mimic the look of hair. You just make sure you keep the brush nice and wet, so this way you're not dragging the caulking, you're just going over top of it. And you create a nice, hair look. I'm doing that right now. Unfortunately, I'm gonna definitely have to give this a couple days to fully dry, or at least dry enough to where if I touch it, I don't, create, dimples in it or fingerprints in it. And then once it's all dry, then I will go ahead and start working on the dress. I did find a dress. I know you saw it just a minute ago. It's kind of a blue color dress. That's pretty much the best one I can find for now with what the stores have for, say, something like this. We were trying to go by the date that's on the Tombstone to try to find something that was kind of semi-period correct, just so it looks a little more appropriate. So I found the closest one I could. So that's essentially the one I'm going to go with. But other than that, now I'm just going to have to sit and wait for this thing to dry. Okay, so it's all put on. I brushed out the rest of it. Now it's just got to let that dry. It will get another coat of paint. So I'm going to put one more coat of paint on it just to make sure that it's definitely well coated. And then I'll start doing some aging, that kind of stuff. While I already had that stuff mixed up, I went ahead and just mixed a pinch more up, and then went ahead and just gave this its first coat of everywhere it needed to be. Now, when I originally did that, I had it inside the lid area, but I took it out of the lid because I didn't want it to get stuck when the paint dried. So I went ahead and pulled it out and just stuck it there by itself. So now just let it dry. All right, so I got out here in the sun so I could put the next coat of gray paint on it. I'll also throw a little bit more of my mortar mix on there to give it a little more of a stone-like texture. I added a little more caulking to where the hair is at just because I didn't like the way the hair kind of dove in. It looked like it just kind of stopped in the middle of nowhere, so I added a little more there. So I gave that a little bit of cure time. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then the next step is to start doing all the aging. All right, so I put the that first coat of gray on there, and then you saw where I took the thin set, which is a tile mortar, and just kind of tossed it on there, sporadically, so it gets a lot of imperfections in it because old concrete is not all nice and smooth. It has a lot of areas where it might break down differently than other areas, so it gives it a more natural kind of look to it. Once that was dry, you saw where I kind of blew the excess off. I put a second coat of the gray on there, which you see is all nice and glossy at the moment, so it's still drying. Once that's dry, then I'll go ahead and start the aging process. All right, so I had to move the painting operation indoors due to weather. It's clouding up outside and starting to feel a few sprinkles. So I guess I get to paint it inside the shop. Here we go. I'm going to be starting with the black now. And all I'm going to be doing here is just highlighting certain areas that would normally be like a darker color, down on the bottom here, things like that, shadow areas, also water runoff areas, and stuff like that. So, and then after that, I'll do a little bit of green, mostly towards the base area, where you'd normally see something like that. And then certain areas outside of that, got a little bit of brown, and then we should be done. All right, now to just let this fully dry. The last thing I did was a heavy diluted black to kind of make areas where I have standing water so it'll dry naturally, so it'll leave certain marks in certain areas. But as soon as this is all dry, I'll get the mechanism hooked up and we'll see the finished product. All right, so here it is, all painted, set up. Now what I did is I put a hand on this side to make it look like that's what's pushing the lid open. And obviously when it's dark out and you just have ambient light and stuff like that, you obviously won't be able to see down inside there and see that it's just a sleeve. But I'm going to put my camera on the stand. I want to show you how I set it up to be able to access the interior portion. So if say like I got to get down to the motor or something like that, I made it to where I can access that stuff without having to do any major disassembly. All right, so I went ahead and shut it off real fast. Now, if I ever have to get down inside there, you know, where the motor's at or the linkages and all that kind of stuff, I wanted to be able to access it very easily. So the way I did it is I made it to where the hand can actually lift up, grab the top of the statue, and the lid just comes right off. Now I gained all access to the motor, the linkages, the push rod, that bolt that I said I was going to put a cotter key in. So if I ever have to do any kind of repairs, or if I'm disassembling it somewhat for storage purposes, it allows me to get right there to all the whole entire drive system for it. And then when I'm ready to turn it on or I'm done, it just fits right back down inside here, like that, with the hand back down top of it, and it's ready to be plugged in and ready to be used again. Overall, I like the way this one came out. I know I said earlier in the video, I said, you know, I like to make more work for myself, but I think doing the addition with the statue on there was definitely a good call. Definitely makes it look a little bit better than just a flat, you know, lid with no real character whatsoever to it. And then I was going to do a hand, but I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. I like the way I did the hand. I have it much higher. But one, it acts as, it's a little more pronounced this way too. It allows me to move it out of the way to get the lid off. And then I dressed it with a white sleeve and some lace, maybe like it was like a bride or, you know, somebody like that, you know, down inside the crypt. But overall, I think it looks pretty good. But I don't know about you guys, but every time I look at it, I think to myself, it feels like it's missing something, like it needs something else, or like it's not complete, or, you know, like it just needs that extra piece to kind of give it like that wow factor. There we go. What do you all think? I think that's definitely the missing piece that makes this prop look so much better. Now, the reason I ended up doing this, because the more I started looking at it, and with the tombstone breaking right there in that, you know, specific spot, and say not breaking at the very base or just rocking like it's being pushed from underneath, was kind of starting to not make a whole lot of sense, to be honest with you. And when I kind of realized that, I was really far along. I already had all the foam on it. I already had the statue made. I was getting ready to do the monster mud on the dress. And by that point, I'm definitely way too far along to sit there and want to start all over again. I mean, I would if I had needed to, but I really didn't want to. So I was trying to think, what could I do to essentially salvage this prop and make it to where there's a rhyme or reason to the tombstone doing what it's doing. So I was like, oh, I'll just put a character back there. So I picked up a skeleton and put him back there. But when I first stuck him back there, it was very plain. There was nothing special about it. It was just a skeleton standing there. So I was like, all right, well, I'll put some clothing on him. I'll tatter it up really good. Maybe make it look like a zombie. But then I started doing some more thinking, which I tend to do a lot of that. I was like, you know, I kind of really want both aspects of the prop to tie into each other. You know, I kind of wanted to make it so it didn't look like an afterthought, even though it was an afterthought, but I didn't want it to look like an afterthought. So I went back to the store, and I'm kind of looking around, trying to get some ideas. And I found that jacket right there, and I was like, you know, maybe I could dress him up to look like a groom. essentially, and everything. So what I did is I picked this jacket up. You can see I kind of tore it up really good and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I ended up making the hand look like a bride's hand, essentially, with the lace and stuff like that on there. So essentially, what it is that gives placement. That kind of gives a reason why he is essentially by this particular crypt. So it's essentially a groom helping his bride out of the crypt, and he's the one breaking the tombstone. So it kind of builds a story. It's kind of like a love story, I guess you say. Not to use the word love for a Halloween prop, but it builds that story. That you have your bride and groom wanting to walk the earth one more time. So I'm definitely much more happier with it. I definitely feel that really made this prop a much better looking prop, in my opinion. You'll have to leave me a comment telling me what you guys think. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely hit that like button for me. Now, if you want to see how I built the metal armature portion of that skeleton, hang around for a couple more minutes after the video. I'll show how I built the metal portion. It's just made out of some electrical conduit. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and shut out the lights so you can see what it looks like with some ambient light. And then I also have that lantern is one of those solar power ones where it has the natural flicker. So it definitely adds a nice little nighttime effect. And if I wanted to, after it's in the display, I could always add a light down the side there, maybe a fog machine or something like that, just to add a little extra creepiness to it. But overall, like I said, I'm much more happier with this prop. I definitely think that addition was worth doing. Thanks for watching. Here I go thinking again, I need to cut this out. I was sitting on my chair looking at it and thinking, this profile right here looks a lot better than this profile right here. Now, the reason I say this is because this profile, some of the stuff is kind of obscured a little bit by like his jacket, his arm, the lantern, the hand, for some reason, didn't seem like it stood out as good. But when you look at it from this profile, the prop looks better. Like he's looking at you. You can see the arm. You can see the lantern, no problem. You can see the full tombstone with no issues. But the lid coming this way with the hand on the other side, you really couldn't see the hand and everything. So I made it a quick decision to change the lid. I made the lid go the other way, move the hand to this side. So now when you look at it, you can see the entire prop, every aspect of the prop, including, like the small stuff like the hand down there. And I also kind of think with the lid and the tombstone going opposite directions, kind of catches your eye a little bit better. So I like this change. I think it was a better design to do it this way. Let's go ahead and get to the skeleton. Okay, so if you decided to hang out for the bonus features, I thank you for sticking it out with me. The reason I didn't put him in with the original video is because I wanted to have that little bit of element of surprise at the very end, by saying it looks like it's just missing something, and bam, you have that skeleton there. So I really didn't want to have him part of the video, but I wanted to be able to show how I did the reinforcement, essentially the armature of it, just in case anybody was kind of curious. So I figured I'd just throw this in as a little added bonus thing. Pretty much all it was is just half-inch electrical conduit. I made sure that the main back piece was one piece, so I slowly bent it a little at a time until I got it all the way down to the foot. See, I have a little plate right here that it's welded to, and then I have that screwed to the prop. Then I added a second one here that comes up to here. That gives it a lot of stability from going forward and going this direction, because he is kind of leaning this way. I added this other piece around here, and what that is that's giving me a little more support from it tipping and going this way. And then the other pipe coming up here is giving me the stability so he's not, being able to tip back and forth like this as the tombstone rocks. Now, I did make a little mistake by building it this way. It made it to where I couldn't put the pants on like you normally would. So what I did is I cut the back of the pants all the way up, wrapped them around, and I just used hot glue and glued the seam back together. It's in the back, so you don't see it anyways. And that's how I had to put the pants on. And then what I also did is at the time of building this, I wasn't sure if I was going to do a lantern or not, but I wanted to have the ability to do a lantern if I wanted to, but I didn't want to have any like full commitments. So what I did here is I got this piece right here that I built. See this little metal rod comes to the back here. It slides into these two sleeves with this piece right here. It has 2 of those on there, so it can't twist. This can come right out. So if I don't want to use the lantern, or say for storage purposes, I can just pull this out, and it makes it much easier to store. If I want to put the lantern back on there or have him hold something, then I literally just slide this back in, push the arm back down on top of the rig, and it's ready to go. And the way I did the arm that's on the Tombstone is I took the other arm off, I kept the hand, the forearm, and taped one of these noodles to the rest of it. It's getting harder to find pool noodles this time of year, so I used one of these. And you see where I essentially glued it into here. And when I glued it into here, that gave me the flexibility right here for this to move easily here. And then the hand sits under that screw and washer on there, and that's what allows it to move back and forth. And obviously, once it's all under the jacket, you don't see it. But that's how I essentially created this area. So I had the flexibility to move, but no real resistance that was giving the Tombstone and the motor any kind of extra stress on it. But this is essentially how I built the reinforcement armature, I guess you could say, for the skeleton himself, and then also the bracketry for the lantern. So if you stuck it around for this bonus feature, thank you for that, and hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for watching.